Picture this, you've hit your favorite spot at the local dam. You've found the perfect swim, mixed up some top shelf, pricey burley, and laid out a spread that should have every trophy fish in the area lining up for a feed. But an hour goes by, then two. Your rod tip is dead quiet and your float hasn't even bobbed once. Or worse, you're just getting hammered by tiny pickers when you're out here chasing a monster. Sound familiar? What if I told you that right now a proper lunker is sitting just a few meters away staring at your bait and swimming off in a panic? Yeah, you heard me right. You aren't feeding the fish, you're scaring the living daylights out of them. Today, we're exposing the biggest mistake that turns your expensive burley into a total fish repellent. And trust me, it's not what they're telling you on the back of the packet at the tackle shop. You ready for the truth? To get our heads around this, we've got to think like a fish for a second. Toss out that human logic of the more tasty stuff, the better. A fish's senses are on a whole other level. Their nose is 1,000 times sharper than a dog's. Their lateral line picks up the tiniest ripples in the water. And the way they see the world is nothing like how we do. In the fishing world, we talk about pressure and being clued up. A massive carp or a solid bream didn't get to that size by being stupid. They're suspicious buggers. If something feels off, they're gone. We think we're setting out a 5-star buffet, but if that buffet smells like a chemical lab or looks like a dodgy trap, no trophy fish is coming anywhere near it. So let's break down exactly where we're getting it wrong. Righto, let's start with the most common blunder out there, what I like to call the chemical attack. Plenty of fishos reckon you can't have too much of a good thing, so they go and tip half a bottle of scent into their burley. Standing on the bank, it smells sweet. Strawberry, garlic, you name it. But you've got to think about what's happening underwater. In that dense water, smells travel differently and the concentration at your spot hits the roof. For a fish with its sensitive receptors, that's not an invite to lunch, it's a full-on chemical burn. It's like someone letting off a can of capsicum spray right in your face. The fish comes in, takes a hit to the nose and bolts in a panic. It's even worse in cold water when everything moves a bit slower. A classic mistake is pouring concentrated dip straight into the feeder without a second thought. All you're doing is creating a dead zone around your hook that a fish simply can't get near. The second big mistake comes down to the basic physics of oils and fats. You've probably heard that oils are a shocker in cold water, but let's talk about why it actually scares the fish off. Imagine you've chucked in some fishy liquid or hemp oil, but the water's sitting below 10 degrees. That oil isn't going to dissolve, mate. It just clumps up into sticky little blobs or a nasty film. When a fish moves in and starts filtering your bait, those fatty particles coat its gills and mouth. Instead of a feed, it gets a face full of gunk. It can't breathe properly and its senses are totally clogged with frozen fat. The fish reckons the food is off or even dangerous, so it bails to clear its gills and it won't be coming back anytime soon. The real kicker. In the summer, that same mix would absolutely smash it, but right now, it's working like a total plug, shutting your swim down completely. Point number 3 is all about the colour of your burley. A lot of blokes really underestimate how much it needs to match the bottom. Picture your typical Aussie dam, usually a dark, muddy floor. Then you go and dump a few kilos of bright yellow burley right on top. You've basically just created a massive glowing target. Now the small fry might find it interesting, but for a big, wary carp or a proper trophy fish, that bright patch screams danger. Against a light background, they stick out like a sore thumb to any predator. A hungry cod or a big perch is just waiting for a moment like that. For a real trophy fish, the instinct to stay alive is way stronger than the urge for a feed. They see that bright spot like a bloody spotlight in a dark room and prefer to stick to the shadows on the edges where their camo actually works. You could be sitting over that traffic light for hours, while the big ones just circle the outskirts, never actually committing to the spot. Problem number 4 is your particle size. You know the old saying, the bigger the better? Well, when it comes to burley, it's actually the opposite. If your mix is nothing but fine dust, crumbs and crushed biscuits, you're just creating a massive cloud in the water. That cloud is like a dinner bell for all the small pickers. They'll swarm in, making a total nuisance of themselves and constantly pecking at your hook, never letting it settle. The big fellas, they can't stand all that commotion, and honestly, there's no real food there for them. A massive bream isn't going to waste energy filtering through dust. He'll take one look, realize it's not worth the effort, and keep moving in search of a proper feed, like shells, worms, or bigger grains. Fine, dusty burley is all right if you want a high-paced session with the small stuff, but if you're after a trophy, it's the quickest way to miss out. Number 5 is off bait. This is a classic mistake on those long fishing trips. You've cooked up your corn or mash, left the bucket out in the sun, and by lunchtime the next day, the whole lot's starting to turn. It gets that nasty sour smell, but a lot of blokes reckon, no worries, the fish won't mind, it's just fermenting. Absolute rubbish. That's a massive myth. There's a huge difference between controlled fermentation and straight-up rot. That sour mix completely messes with the pH levels in your swim. It starts pumping out CO2 and toxins, making the water around your bait go acidic. Fish can sniff out that chemical change from a mile off. To them, it's a massive red flag that the food is spoiled and dangerous. You're basically turning a cracker of a spot into a total dead zone. If your bait goes sour, be ruthless. Chuck it in the scrub, but never, ever throw it in the drink. Mistake number 6 is having a mix that's way too active. I call it the underwater geyser. Plenty of brands pack their burley with floating bits like ground hemp or coconut to draw fish in from a distance. But when you overdo it, the bottom becomes absolute chaos. Everything's fizzing, rising and sinking. Now for hungry carp, and that might be a winner. No, for a big wary bream or a decent tench, that kind of unnatural movement is a massive red flag. Food shouldn't be jumping into their mouths. Instead of a nice feed carpet, you're just creating a messy column of junk. The big fellas want inert food that stays put and waits to be eaten. All that lifting and popping just looks like a bunch of tiddlers making a mess, rather than a steady, reliable meal for a proper fish. Раздел 7. Косяки с увлажнением. Запомните, сухая прикормка – это главная беда новичков. На вид смесь кажется нормальной, даже в шары лепится, но как только она касается воды, пиши пропало. Шар разлетается в пыль либо еще в толще, либо при ударе о дно. В итоге ваш корм разносит течением по всей акватории. Вместо того, чтобы собрать рыбу в одну точку, вы ее просто размазываете. Вместо четкого пятна полметра на полметра рыба начинает шариться по дну, собирая крошки. Пищевая конкуренция падает, и клев становится рваным и дохлым. Крупная рыба любит стоять на компактном столе. Если корм унесло на 5 метров вниз по течению, стая просто растянется и уйдет. Правильно замешанный корм должен доходить до дна в кормушке и только там начинать работать. Механика смеси — это единственный способ по-настоящему управлять рыбой.
Number 8's a classic, and it's all down to smells. Not the burley, but your hands. See, fish have got a bloody incredible sense of smell. Now take a look at your hands. You've been having a smoke, put on some mozzie spray, slapped on the sunscreen, or maybe you filled up the ute with petrol on the way here. Every one of those smells, nicotine, chemicals, fuel, they're pure poison to a fish and a massive red flag. When you're packing the feeder or hooking your bait with those hands, you're leaving a trail of that stuff in the water. To a fish, that's like an air raid siren going off, especially that mozzie repellent. It's got stuff in it that sends fish into a total panic. If you've sprayed yourself down and then dug your hands into the burley bucket, you might as well pack your gear and head home. You won't be seeing any big ones today.
Always give your hands a proper scrub with the water from the river before you even touch your gear. Point 9 is all about the food coma. Believe it or not, you actually can overfeed fish, especially if you're using heavy-duty gear when they're not all that active. If you're dumping kilos of pellets, boilies, or fatty mush into your spot when the water's cold or the weather's acting up, their metabolism just slows right down. They'll grab a couple of mouthfuls, feel full as a goog, and just shut down. They might still be sitting right there on your mark, but they won't touch your hook. Your bait's basically lost in a massive pile of free tucker. The golden rule is berley is meant to tease them, not feed them. It should smell amazing and get them fired up, but be light on the actual calories. You want them scavenging around, getting hungrier and hungrier, until the only decent meal they find is your hook bait. Mistake number 10, forgetting the current when you're first baiting up. It's basic geometry, but heaps of fishos completely overlook it. You find your spot, clip the line to lock in the distance, and start hucking big feeders out. But if there's a decent flow and some depth to the water, that feeder's going to drift. As it sinks, the burley washes out and settles way downstream from where you actually measured. So you're fishing one spot, but the feed is a few meters away. The fish are all over the burley while your bait is sitting in a dead zone upstream. Big fish rarely move above the scent trail. They're either right on it or sitting just below. You might think they're just not biting, but really, you've just missed the mark. You've got to account for that drift to make sure your bait lands right in the sweet spot. 11-й пункт – это отсутствие мяса, когда оно просто необходимо. Мы все привыкли кормить рыбу всякими кашами да сухарями, но для того же леща или карпа животный белок – это основа рациона. Мотыль, опарыш, рубленый червь – вот что им нужно. Если вы ловите в месте, где полно естественного корма, и закидываете туда одну только сладкую кондитерку, рыба может просто не понять, что это еда. Представьте, вы настроились на сочный стейк, а вам подсовывают сухое печенье. Пахнет вроде заманчиво, но наесться этим невозможно. А вот если добавить в прикормку сочнину, резаного опарыша или червя, это дает мощнейший сигнал. Ребята, здесь калорийная еда. Крупная рыба от такого просто сходит с ума. Если же мяса в точке нет, не удивляйтесь, что на крючок садится одна мелочь, пока трофейные экземпляры копаются в иле в паре метров от вас, выбирая натурального мотыля. Mistake 12 is all about the salt and sugar, or more to the point, getting the balance dead wrong. See, salt and sugar are nature's own flavor boosters and preservatives. Out in the fresh, the water's pretty thin on minerals, so the fish are always on the hunt for them. Tossing a bit of salt in your burley during the spring or when the water's chilly works like an absolute magnet. But don't go too heavy on the hand, mate. If it's too salty, it dehydrates the fish and they'll clear out pretty quick. Same deal with sugar and molasses in the summer. You know, a bit of sweetness is grand, but there's a catch. And if you mix up a sweet batch first thing in the morning and sit out in the heat all day, that sugar's gonna ferment. By lunchtime, your burley's turned into vinegar and sour booze, and the fish won't want a bar of it. It's all about being smart with the seasons. Stick to salt and spices in the spring, and go for sugar and fruit in the summer. Just keep it steady. Moderation is the name of the game. Number 13. Feeding noise. Most carp fishers know all about spomming, using a rocket to get your bait out there. It's effective, but it's noisy as anything. If you're fishing in the shallows, say less than 2 meters deep, dropping a heavy spod or a big ball of burley is like throwing a brick into the water. Big fish are terrified of those heavy surface impacts. If you're bombing the spot every 2 minutes, you're basically just scaring the wary ones away. They'll back off to a safe distance and wait for the racket to stop. Often it's better to put down a decent amount of bait all at once and then keep quiet for an hour or two, only topping it up with tiny amounts. Silence is a massive part of the game, especially on wild or heavily fished waters. Mistake number 14 is mixing your berley with tap water. Might seem like a small thing, right? Plenty of blokes prep their mix at home to save time at the bank, so they just use the kitchen tap. But here's the problem. Tap water is full of chlorine. That stuff is literally made to kill things. For a fish, the smell of chlorine is a dead giveaway of danger. It'll drown out any fancy scents you've got in there. Vanilla, strawberry, you name it. Even if you let the water sit for a while, that chemical trace is still there. When you rock up to the water with that mix, you're bringing a harsh, foreign chemical into their environment. Listen, always use water straight from the spot where you're fishing. It's got the local microflora, the right pH, and none of that scary chemistry. Keep it natural if you want to land the big ones. Point 15, the mismatch between your berley and your hook bait. Picture this, you're chucking out nothing but fish pellets, but you've got sweet corn on the hook. It just doesn't add up. Or you're berleying with a sweet biscuit mix and using a bunch of worms. Sure, sometimes a bit of contrast works, but more often than not, the big fellas are looking for exactly what the berley patch smells like. If you've laid down a solid carpet of hemp and corn on the bottom, you'd better have corn on that hook, or at least something that looks like it. See, fish hoover up food like a vacuum. If your bait tastes or smells totally different from the rest of the feed, they'll spit it out as a reflex, like it's a piece of junk. The golden rule is simple. Match what's on your hook to what's in your berley. It's the absolute basics of fishing, but people always seem to forget it when they start overcomplicating things. Mistake 16 is what we call the vacuum effect and species competition. Sometimes your berley is just too tasty and way too fine. It ends up attracting a massive swarm of aggressive little pickers. There are hundreds of them darting around like mad and cleaning out the spot in seconds. Now a big old bream is a different beast. He's casual, slow, and likes to take his time. He shows up, sees this frantic mob of small fry causing a scene, and just can't be bothered with the chaos. He's not going to fight through that crowd. So your job is to weed out the small stuff. How? You've got to bulk up the mix, get rid of the fine dust, and make your berley heavier and stickier so it sits on the bottom like a rock. You want chunks that are only manageable for a fish with a mouth big enough to swallow them. If you don't change the consistency to keep the small fry away, the big fellas won't even get a look in. Point 17. The lack of food competition. Look, it's a bit of a double-edged sword. If you dump way too much berley and spread it thin over a massive area, the fish have no reason to scramble. They'll just cruise about, picking up a nibble here and there at their own pace. No rush, no worries. They're full, they're relaxed, and the bite's going to be dead quiet. The sweet spot is having just enough tucker on the bottom to start a proper feeding frenzy. You want heaps of fish and not much food. That's when the instinct kicks in. Get stuck in before someone else does. In that state, they lose their cool and absolutely smash your bait. The real art of berleying is that fine line between calling them in and overfeeding them. You're basically trying to create a bit of a shortage right in the middle of all that smell. Mistake number 18. Getting hung up on seasonal bait colours. Most blokes reckon you need dark bait in spring and light stuff in summer, but that's a massive oversimplification. It all comes down to water clarity. See, in summer, the water can bloom and turn into a murky green soup. Down on the bottom, visibility is basically zero. In that case, the colour doesn't even matter. It's all about the scent and the vibrations. Then autumn rolls around, the water clears right up, and even a dark mix stands out at depth. The real mistake is just following some old rulebook word for word instead of looking at the actual conditions on the day. Sometimes a bright red mix in spring works wonders because it looks like a bunch of bloodworms. Stop worrying about the dogmas, start experimenting and let the fish tell you what they want.
Mistake 19, ignoring the thermocline. It's more about the physics of the water, but your burley is a huge part of it. See, now, in the middle of a hot summer, the water gets layered. You've got the warm stuff on top, but deep down it's cold and completely starved of oxygen. If you're dumping bait into a deep hole where the oxygen's been cut off, the fish just won't go down there. Doesn't matter how good your mix is, they'll be sitting mid-water right above that cold snap. In that case, bottom feeding is a total waste of time. It's actually worse because the bait just sits there rotting away since there's no oxygen for the bacteria to break it down. The blunder here is baiting the floor when the fish are hanging out upstairs. You want a light, slow-sinking mix, like a zig rig, or you need to find a shallower spot where the water's actually getting turned over and mixed up. And number 20, the final mistake, believing in a magic pill. Too many blokes think I'll just buy the flashiest, most expensive brand and the fish will jump straight in the bucket. You're just shifting the blame to the manufacturer. But ground bait is just a tool, mate. It's like a hammer. You can build a house with it, or you can smash your own thumb. The priciest mix out there. If you mess up the prep or chuck it in the wrong spot at the wrong time, will get outfished by basic pellets in the hands of someone who actually knows the water. The biggest mistake you can make, not using your noggin. You've got to read the bottom, watch the weather, and see how the fish are acting. Your mix needs to do a specific job right there and then, not just be some ritual sacrifice to the fish gods.
Fishing ain't a lottery, it's a game of chess with Mother Nature. By now you should see that your burley isn't just fish food, it's a precision tool for getting inside their heads. Scent, colour, the way it breaks down, and the nutritional value. Any one of these can land you the trophy of a lifetime or spook it for good. The big takeaway today, stop chucking it in blindly. Every time you hit the water, ask yourself, who am I setting the table for? And what does this look like from under the surface? Go easy on the heavy chemicals, keep your mix fresh, and always mind what's on your hands. Stick to these rules, and you'll see those dead spots fire up, swapping the tiddlers for some proper, thumping bream and big carp. Cheers for watching to the end. If you've been caught out by any of these blunders, let us know in the comments. What's the weirdest thing you've ever added to your burley? Make sure to subscribe, smash that like button, and I'll catch you lot out on the water. Tight lines and good on ya.